Hello and welcome to ChinnyVision, this time Chinny Reckon. This is a new segment on ChinnyVision where I try and give some help and advice to people buying machines or looking to buy machines, because I get asked a lot of questions about what people should buy, and I thought the best place to start was with the Sinclair Spectrum, and this is my Spectrum here. It's a 48K model, issue 4S, just get that in the centre there, and it's the machine you will have seen a lot of in the media lately, with the two recreations in inverted commas, the one that looks like a joypad and the other one that looks exactly like this. Now, anyone who follows me on Twitter knows I have a bit of an issue with the recreations because, well, they're not really, people I think they might be buying a Spectrum, but in one case they're just buying a Bluetooth keyboard that runs an emulator on a PC or Mac that looks like a Spectrum, and in the other case they're just buying a joypad with an emulator built in, and frankly you can do all that stuff on a PC, so essentially what you're paying for is a rather expensive device that looks a bit like a Spectrum. And it's not like these things are particularly expensive or difficult to obtain. Personally speaking, if they were recreating something like a Elan Enterprise, say, or a Jupiter Race, well, that's quite a different proposition because those machines are rare and difficult to get hold of, and you might go, yeah, I'd like I can't possibly afford that kind of money, so I'm going to get hold of a recreated one. But guys, this is a Spectrum. There were, according to some accounts, 5 million made, some other accounts 7 million made, and they are as common as anything and cheap as anything. So I thought I was going to run through the Spectrums I own and also tell you a bit about the other ones you can buy so that you can make an informed decision. And the thing to remember is you can, on all of these, put SD card solutions into the expansion ports. I'll flip that around there. And you can probably see that in there if the light catches that. The expansion port is there. And run SD cards and have instant loading. So again, you can load every game ever as opposed to just a few hundred or whatever loaded onto the machine. So this is the kind of the original model of Spectrum. There was the 16K and the 48K. We're going to ignore the 16K because ultimately it's not much use for playing games or doing much with. Collectible, but yeah, not really one you're going to be able to play Jet Set Willy and things on because you need 48K to do that. So this is a 48K. It's an issue 4S. A little bit later, there's various issues, and they will be indicated on the back usually, or on the board actually. Come to think of it, because you'll have a serial number there that you can trace. And this one actually says made by Samsung in the Republic of Korea. So actually, people think all the Spectrums were made in Scotland. No, they weren't. Later on, quite towards the end of his tenure, Sir Clive opted to make some Spectrums in South Korea with Samsung, who were making a lot of the components for the Spectrum anyway, and also in Portugal. This model has actually been refurbished. I bought it from, guy's name's on there, Zig.net. He doesn't routinely, I believe, sell lots and lots of these things, but he has a few that you can buy. And it's actually been all recapped, so all the capacitors are new in it. It's had its power circuitry upgraded, so it no longer needs the big heat sink inside it. And it also outputs composite video from what was the UHF port, so it no longer needs a TV tuner to tune in. It just outputs composite, and you would have seen that on some ChinnyVision videos. When you see it's obviously composite on a Spectrum as opposed to RGB, then it's coming out of this machine. There are different issues of the Spectrum, as I say. I think one of the most common is the issue 2. Issue 1s, I believe, are quite rare, and I think they've had a bug fix on the boards as well with the issue 1s. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but you can look at the different models and the ones you can get, and even if it's a bit beaten up, and the one you're looking at on eBay is a bit beaten up, this part here on this Spectrum is all new. This metal part underneath the keyboard, because all these are available. all these face plates on the keyboard. You can get those brand new and stick those on. So even if you've got a Spectrum that's looking a bit beaten up and not very well loved, then for a few quid, I think about 15, 16 pounds, something like that, don't quote me on that, you can put a new faceplate on there and it's completely identical and feels completely right. So that's something you can do, and that'll make your Spectrum look as good as new. The other thing to remember is that if the keyboard membrane under here is faulty, again, they are available and easily replaced. The biggest thing to watch out for with these machines, these Spectrums, a lot of them have been abused and don't work. So in my opinion, it's best to buy a refurbished one if you can, because this costs barely any more than a eBay job that might claim to be working. In fact, I had two 48Ks that didn't work before I decided to go for a refurbished one. You may get lucky and it may be absolutely fine, but personally, probably opt for the refurb option, and you know you're getting something fairly solid. The other thing is with the Issue 4S, which is the Samsung one, I'm told by the guy who refurbished this is the membranes are much better than the other Spectrums. And in fact, when I had this refurbished, I said, should I have a new membrane? He said, no, you're going to be fine with this one. So this is still has its original 1984 or 5 membrane in it. One thing to note about the power supply on the back is, given the age of the machines, you may not get a power supply with the Spectrum. Let's move that across there, and you can see the power supply there. With this, it's not a huge issue. The Spectrum uses 9 volts. It's got a sticker on there saying center negative that the seller's put on there. That's the other way round. The center to most power supplies, the center pin is negative and the outer sheath is positive. And indeed, that's how many Spectrums have been fried, because the original power supply blew up and little Johnny thought, oh, I've got another power supply, it's 9 volts. He plugs it in, it sends the wrong polarity around the Spectrum and the power circuits go wrong. Or he plugs in the wrong power supply, 12 volts, and fries the RAM, or what have you. So, but you can get replacement power supplies from the future as 8-bit. I've done a video on that before. So they're easily available, and I think about 15, 16 pounds, something like that. Easily obtainable, not a problem. Don't worry if you don't have an original power supply. In fact, you're probably better off without the original power supply, because they're linear power supplies, and the Spectrums do get quite warm. To avoid boring technical details, it's better to have a modern switch mode supply on the Spectrum. I'll get rid of this one, and I don't actually own. I've owned before Spectrum Pluses. I don't own one at the moment. You can see a picture of one here that I've stolen off the internet. These are 48Ks in different cases. Everything that applies to the original 48K applies to the Spectrum Plus. I always found the membranes in these a little bit more prone to break. I found the keys a little bit nasty to use. They're quite nice to look at, but personally, having owned 2 of them back in the early 90s, they're not my particular favourite Spectrum. If you're going to go for a 48K, you're better off going for a proper 48K. The next machine I also don't own, because they're hideously expensive, is the 128K. These are very, very collectible machines. They're the last true Sinclair models. They are obviously Sinclair build quality, and they're quite expensive. You could be paying up to £100 for one, depending on how bidding's going on the day and if it's boxed or not. Very, very collectible, very, very nice to have one, show it off. I'm very envious of people who have one. Probably not the number one choice if you're just looking to get into Spectrum gaming. So I skipped over the 128K Spectrum a little bit there, mainly because I don't own one, and also they're quite expensive. But there is an affordable 128K Spectrum option, and this is the Spectrum Plus 2, the first Amstrad model. Now, covered a little bit on ChinnyVision before, but the Amstrad models get a bad rep, unfairly in fact. The 128K, the grey 128K, was designed by Amstrad, as you've seen on ChinnyVision before, very, very quickly indeed. They didn't get much chance to change much from the 128K Spectrum. So internally, this is pretty much the same, pretty much identical to the Sinclair 128K Spectrum, just with an Amstrad ROM and Amstrad names. There's a few slight incompatibilities, I believe, tiny. You're never going to notice. And these are much cheaper than the 128K Spectrums, typically easily a third of the price, if not less. There's a plentiful supply of them as well. Biggest problems with these are the data corders. As it's an Amstrad, Alan Sugar wanted to build in a data corder, and the tape belts in these do go, and that's a simple thing to solve, very, very cheap. Couple of pounds, including the postage, will get you a new tape belt. You open up the back of the Spectrum, you slip the new belt on. So that's very, very simple. The keyboards are very reliable, unlike the original Spectrums. There's not much to go wrong in there. So, none of the spongy feel of the Sinclair Spectrum. It's a proper hard keyboard. Generally, the same problems with these as the original Spectrums, because Amstrad didn't get a chance to change things around. Flip this around. It still runs off 9 volts DC, so you've still got the problem with the center negative as well. So you've still got the problem that little Johnny could have fried the unit by busting his original power supply and plugging something else in. But this also means, because of the 9 volts, you can get cheap replacement power supplies. So that's good. They do get a little bit warm. There's a little thing there that's out heat, because that big heatsink that was on the side of the 128K Sinclair model is now internal, and the heat comes out there. That's part of the power regulation circuitry. That can potentially play up, as they can in the Spectrum. The power regulators cost about 50p, something like that. Easy to repair inside the unit, not a huge problem at all. So you can do that if needed. The 128K Spectrum has RGB out for better picture quality. The Plus 2 also has RGB out. Note the grey Plus 2s have different outputs to the black Plus 2, so you need to make sure you get the right SCART connector, or right SCART lead or RGB lead for the Spectrum that you've got. Sound again now comes out of a little sound connector there. So there's no need to mod this for composite, because you've got RGB and you've got sound out there. And your expansion port is the same there, and it's pretty much compatible with the original Spectrum. The other thing you also get, which of course you all know about the original Spectrum, is it doesn't have, and I'll hold that up there for you, joystick ports. The Plus 2 does have joystick ports. However, Amstrad, I don't know why, decided to wire them differently to the rest of the world. So you'll either need to get an adapter, which are about £5-6, or get a joystick that has a grey lead on it. Plug your black lead joystick into this, it will not work. Do not buy a Sinclair joystick, because it's basic. I think it's rebranded one of the very cheapest cheater joysticks, and they're rubbish, and they will break within 3 seconds. No steel shafts or micro switches. It's all leaf switches, and absolute rubbish. But for my money, the grey Plus 2 is the Spectrum to own. It's effectively a 128K Sinclair model. It just looks a little bit uglier, but you've got all the benefits of the 128K, and you've got the AY sound and everything else, and it's probably the one to go for, because they're cheap to run and cheap to buy. Amstrad, being Amstrad, couldn't leave things alone, and within about a year, they bought out the black Plus 2, which admittedly looks far, far nicer than the grey Plus 2. Same data recorder. Nicer feel on the buttons, actually, although this one might just not have been used as much as my grey Plus 2. Now, the black Plus 2 looks nicer on your shelf. It's a lovely machine to have around, but there's a couple of gotchas with this model that you've got to look out for. Firstly, Amstrad changed around the ROMs inside the machine, and they had a chance to rearrange the circuitry because it wasn't a rust job like the Grey Plus 2 was. And there is an increased level of incompatibility. Again, most people probably won't notice. You're not certainly looking at differences between something like a Amstrad Plus and a standard Amstrad CPC, where there is probably a 5% incompatibility problem. It's just a few games, but it's something to be aware of. The other thing, and when we flip it around, is you will notice on the back there's a difference. And the PSU is now gone to this, what's that, a 6-pin arrangement. So no more cheap 9-volt PSUs. This needs an Amstrad PSU, and therefore it is highly recommended you do not buy a Plus 2 that does not have its power supply, because this beast here provides plus 5 volts at 2 amps, plus 12 volts at 200 milliamps, and minus 12 volts at 50 milliamps. So you need a Plus 2 supply with this connector on it. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to wire up the best way to do it is to get a PC supply and then wire it onto one of these. You really don't want to be doing that. Forget buying any Spectrum Plus 2 or Plus 3, come to that does not have its original power supply. You're just into a whole world of hurt. Oh, nice. I didn't put this plug on there. Nice red 1980s plug on there. You don't see those anymore, do you? Let's get that out of the way. The power supplies, by the way, are fairly reliable. It's just a big kind of transformer. And there is one thing to look out for, actually, if they don't work, is there's glass fuses, or at least in the Plus 3, there's glass fuses inside the power supply to protect the Spectrum. And actually, quite often, I found, certainly with the Plus 3, is if the power supply appears to be not working, it can be that little fuse that is easily replaced inside the Spectrum power supply. And I used to get mine from car parts shops, or they can probably get them from Maplin, sorry, not Heidi High, but Maplin these days. So, yeah, if you do have a non-working Plus 2 or Plus 3, or Black Plus 2 and Plus 3 power supply, you may find it's actually the glass fuse inside the power supply, so you can have a look at that. But yeah, these are nice units. They feel heavier, and you do have a printer port if you're feeling getting ambitious on the back there. So you can plug in it's an Amstrad Centronics interface, so any Amstrad CPC lead you can plug into there and you can print away, although why you'd want to do that in this day and age, I don't know. But just a nice little addition there. I do like the Plus 2, Black Plus 2. I just don't use it much. I always use the Grey Plus 2, certainly for the reviews, because I've got capture working from the Grey Plus 2. As I mentioned, the video connectors are different on the Black Plus 2 and the Plus 3, and I can't capture from them at the moment. But so yeah, just kind of keep that in mind, that you need a Black Plus 2 video lead rather than the Grey Plus 2 video lead. The drive belt in the Grey Plus 2 applies to the Black Plus 2 as well. And now we're going to the top of the range, and fairly collectible, actually. They seem to go for a few quid these days. I'm not talking about values on this video, by the way, because it's pointless. I can give kind of vague costs, but by the time you could be watching this in 3 years' time, and the cost could have changed. This is my Plus 3. I don't use it much. It's a bit dusty and dirty. It barely gets used, because I mainly use my Grey Plus 2 these days. My original one, actually on display at my workplace for many years as well. And it's the same circuit board pretty much as the Black Plus 2. Additional on the back, everything that applies to the Black Plus 2 applies to this. Again, you've got different PSU, and you need a Plus 3 PSU. A Plus 2 PSU will not work, or it will work, but you probably blow the PSU, because this needs more voltage for the disk drive. So I think the 12 volt line on the Black Plus 2 is 200 milliamps, something like that. This needs 700 milliamps, and it's 12 volt circuit, so you need to keep that in mind. So it must be a Plus 3 power supply. Video cable from Black Plus 2 also works on this. You've also got a disc B connector there, and that is compatible with the Amstrad CPC interface. So if you've got an Amstrad CPC 3.5-inch disk drive, you can plug it in there, it will work fine. The Plus 3 on the back does have a tape port to enable you to load from cassette as well as disc. It is not compatible with the 48K and original 128K cassette loading cables. You will need a Plus 3 dedicated cassette cable. Now, the Plus 3, it has the worst audio known to man. For some reason, and I suspect it's because Amstrad were really busy at the time, there's a bit of a foul up on the audio circuit. Someone decided to cut a few pence off the bill of materials and cut a few components out, and it has horrible, distorted audio. You may get lucky. There's a second revision of the Plus 3, and you'll have no indication when you're buying a Plus 3 if it's the second revision or not. That apparently, and I think there's sometimes people call them the Plus 3B, and the Black Plus 2, by the way, is called the Plus 2A. And if you've got a Plus 3B, and you will have no idea if you're getting a Plus 3B when you're buying it, the audio problem won't be there. But for the vast majority of Plus 3s, yeah, you're going to have the audio problem there. Drive belts in these will need replacing as well. Again, it's made of the same material as the tape belts. There's tutorials for that online, so you can get hold of those. So that's a quick look at the Sinclair Spectrum range. If any of you were thinking of buying one, or perhaps thinking of getting a recreated one, they are lovely machines. Got the Plus 3 there. This is the Plus 2, and all these other machines. These are so wide and large, I can't get them all into shot. But anyway, for my money, if you're not bothered about the aesthetics, my money is on the grey Plus 2. This is my machine that I use all the time. Whenever it says Plus 2 on the ChinnyVision videos, this is the machine that's being captured from. It's the cheapest way to own a 128K Spectrum, really, that's the most compatible. I've found certainly it has the best compatibility with all the games that I need to play for ChinnyVision. Nothing really seems to fail. They're fairly mechanically sound and easily repairable, and the parts are cheap as well. Of course, we need to mention the original 48K machine. It's a wonderful machine. It looks wonderful. I mean, that's that. I mean, you know, it's a Rick Dickinson design as opposed to something Amstrad literally knocked Amstrad's designer into the Far East, literally knocked up in an afternoon. Although, you know, in black, actually, it looks much nicer. You know, if you're buying a machine to look at and for the nostalgic value, you're probably going to go for 48K. But for my money, the grey Plus 2 is the best value for money, the most compatible, the easiest and cheapest Spectrum to run. It may not have the appeal or the looks of a 48K, but for Spectrum gaming, this takes some beating.